Welcome to Ageless. I'm your host, Amanda Lamb. This is a podcast for women, about women, featuring women. It's about what happens when we turn 50 and our culture quietly deems us irrelevant. But we're not our mothers. There's a new generation of 50-plus women who are redefining what it means to thrive in the second half of our lives. Whether you're still raising children, working, caring for aging parents, or just looking for the next chapter, I strongly believe that my guests will inspire you because I know they inspire me. On today's show, my guest is a woman who has worn many hats since her family moved to the North Carolina coast from New Jersey in 1980. She fell in love with the dramatic arts in college at UNC Chapel Hill and then started a career in Wilmington as an actress when the film and TV industry was in its heyday there. You might recognize her from TV series like Under the Dome that was based on a novel by Stephen King, from funny, mellow mushroom commercials, or from the feature film she produced and starred in called Trainwreck. She's also a health and wellness coach, a mentor to young actors, and is in the process of voicing her first audiobook. Wherever you know her from, Maureen Mountcastle is absolutely a jack of many trades, a force of nature, and a great example of a woman who keeps redefining herself. Maureen, welcome to the program.
Hi, thank you, Amanda. That's quite a generous description. I appreciate it.
Well, I mean, you've done a whole lot. And just to be clear, you are over 50, correct?
I am. I'm 58. Yep.
Okay. And I feel like you've had a lot of chapters already. So let's go back to the beginning. You majored in dramatic arts in college. You have a passion for performing. Did you always know that you wanted to be an actor?
I did. I would say from the time I was about 6 years old, my mother and father divorced when I was a baby, and my mother dated a man for quite a few years who was a writer, and he wrote for Hollywood Squares, and he wrote us a play, and I was 5 years old, and he wrote me my first dramatic role, and he planted the seed. He said that I was going to be an actress someday, and I like to sing. I was definitely a singer from a young age, and got identified as, having the gift of singing. So my mother was always encouraging of that because she was a singer herself. And I seemed to be the only one of my siblings that really had that passion. And I think being the youngest in a family that was somewhat dysfunctional and needing some brevity, I was constantly trying to lift the spirits of my family members, and I think I kind of gravitated towards performing. I'm a Pisces too, so I kind of have that dreamy type of personality, and it just has always been my dream and my passion, and something that I think I came to at a very young age.
Yeah,
5 years
and
old.
I mean, I say the same thing about writing because I joke that I started writing when I was 4. Because I remember making these books with, construction paper covers, and I would staple them together and make little, crayon illustrations. And I think my first one was called The Dog That Ate the Frog. So I guess it was like a true crime maybe before that was even a thing. But, I do think we get, especially when it comes to creativity, I think that we have a spark in us from a very young age. But, then you go to college, you say, okay, I'm going to try to make a living at this. It's a tough industry. So what was the first thing that you got as a paid actor that you went, okay, here we go, I got this?
Oh, okay. My first paid job as an actor was the play Grease at Triangle Dinner Theater in Raleigh, North Carolina, when I was still in Chapel Hill. And I made $25 a show.
Wow. Well, okay. What year was that? Not too bad, right?
That was 1984.
Wow. Well, but you loved it, right? I mean, how fun, right? To be performing in Greece and getting paid to do it.
Well, and because that was my childhood favorite film of my life, and I was so thrilled. And I did that I think it was 8 weeks, that run. And, I really didn't consider that some sort of, big feat or anything, but you asked what my first paid job was, and that was it.
What was your role in Greece?
I played Marty. I
Okay.
played Marty twice, actually. I also played it at the Newbern Civic Theater a couple of years later. But yeah, that theme kept popping up, that show. But
What was the first role, then paid role, that really kind of you felt like it was starting to put you on the map?
okay. Well, the first commercial that I ever did in Raleigh back in, let's see, when was this? Probably like the year 2000, maybe, was the Triangle Town Center Mall opened up. And I had just gotten an agent because it was just as film and television was starting to kind of pick up in North Carolina. And it was my first audition actually for this new agency, and it was a big project. They were doing a commercial and they were using photos, and I talked my son, who was 13, into going in with me because I saw in the lobby that they had 13-year-old boys. And so we wound up
Oh,
booking that commercial,
together.
much to his chagrin.
I'm
Yeah,
sure.
much to his chagrin.
And he's
He
not
did
an
not,
is he not an actor today?
probably because of this commercial, he
He
is
is not
not,
an
because
actor. What was the commercial for? I mean, you don't have to say the company, but what kind of commercial?
oh, no, it was for Triangle Town Center Mall. They were
Oh,
opening
oh,
it.
that's right. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Well,
Yeah. So that was my first commercial. And he was mortified because they blew up these pictures. One of them was me with my arms around his neck.
oh,
And he was, 13 years old at the time.
not cool.
And then
Not cool, mom,
they
right?
made him life size. And yeah, it just so happened to be the mall that all of his friends shopped at.
Sure, of
So
course. Of
yeah,
course.
he got teased. And then the commercial was him looking at me and me talking about how I shop at Christmas time. And he just was mortified, embarrassed. And so he decided he did not want to act. But my daughter turned out to be quite talented. And she got cast in a Disney worldwide tour of a show called Bear in the Big Blue House. And really, I think after Marley's tour, I went with her we traveled for about a year. And I think that was kind of right as both of us started booking things, and 2003 and 4 seemed to be the turning point. And the first movie that I did was a movie called The Fifth Quarter that was based on a true story that was about the Wake Forest football team and a young boy who gave up his had died, and his parents donated his organs and saved a bunch of lives, and then that kind of catapulted his older brother into a team that became victorious. And so they made a movie about it called The Fifth Quarter, and I starred opposite Andy McDowell and had a nice little role in that. And that was my first SAG project and my first real big score, I would say.
And you've done so many things since then. I mean, you've done commercials, you've done movies, you've done TV. I mean, what are some of the standout things when you think about your career that really stand out to you as significant in your professional development?
Yeah. Well, to be honest, I was just thrilled that I actually got to do it, because for so many years, when I graduated from Chapel Hill, my ex-husband's business was in Raleigh, so moving to New York or LA didn't seem to be an option for me. Although I did get a job with American Airlines in hopes that I could get an agent in New York and an agent in LA, but it turned out I had really low seniority, so that didn't really work out for me because I could never get any time off. So I was just very fortunate that film actually did start to take off in North Carolina. And with Marley doing her tour and then me coming back, my agent then started sending me out on a lot of things. And I started working in film. And I think the first film I did, actually prior to Fifth Quarter, was one called Dear Angry. And I never, there was a lot of independent films being made in the Triangle area at the time. So I never really lacked for work, but I was really just thrilled to be acting and thrilled to be in front of the camera and thrilled to actually be able to do what my childhood dream was.
I mean,
so I wasn't.
there's something about that, right? About having a dream and then pursuing it and it actually happening, And again, not to go back to writing, but for me, when I saw my books on the shelves for the first time at a bookstore, it was like, wow, this is amazing. If I never do anything else, right? This is amazing. Right.
Yeah. So I think for me, I never really had the aspirations of being famous, or in fact, that kind of scares me. That's not something I really seek, is to be famous or fame. I just like working, and I think what's always attracted me about film and even theater is that you have a little family and
Yeah.
everybody's working
It's a
towards
team.
the same
Yeah.
goal. Yeah.
Is it harder to get jobs now? I mean, you've really been able to sustain your career, which is really what part of this show is about, second chances and reinventing and new chapters. How do you do that as you grow old or in an industry that, let's face it, I mean, I'm on TV. I know what this is about.
Yeah.
Age of impacts, I'm sure, the roles that you can play, the roles that you are seeking, the roles that people are seeking to hire you for.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you have to get comfortable with, moving up a decade every, couple of years,
Yeah.
and knowing that you're being submitted for roles now 55 to 65. And I'm okay with that because it is what it is. And I'm happy to work if I can work and there's anything that there is for me. I think I just have always had other interests. I've always had other avenues of income so that I don't rely on this as the only way to pay my bills. So I am a little bit of an entrepreneur, and that's why I coach actors and I do other things so that I always have something I can fall back on, which I think is necessary for a lot of actors. Obviously, there's only a small percentage of people that really get to make a living solely doing that, right?
Absolutely.
So I've always had the attitude of I'm thrilled when I book something, but I don't count on it.
Yeah, and I mean that's the same thing with writers. Most writers, no matter how many books they have, they do not live off that income. So that's very common. I like what you were just mentioning, that you were talking about coaching actors, and I know in the bio that I read about you, you also talk about mentoring. Talk about that. How do you mentor, especially young women in this business? I mean, what do you tell them? How do you help them navigate it?
Well, I think one of the reasons why I really do enjoy working with children and their parents is that when Marley started working professionally, I never had that any experience as a stage mom. I only knew what I had kind of carved out for myself as an actor. And she was very lucky in that by the time I started working, I had found the best teachers for acting and singing and all of that in Raleigh. And so she only got the best training. And so I kind of created a way to support her. And just naturally, when we came back from tour, there were other kids who were starting to tour, and everybody kept referring them to me and saying,
Wow.
well, ask Maureen how she and Marley did it. And so my phone was ringing all the time with moms whose kids were doing shows and they wanted to know how I did it. And so little by little, I was constantly spending hours and hours with moms telling them how to do things. And someone said, well, maybe you should start
Make
a business.
A business out of this. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure it's really helpful when you know nothing about an industry, especially something where you have a child involved, to have somebody else to give you guidance about that. And you do so many things. I mean, you reference that, but let's talk a little bit about your health and wellness coaching, because that's become a really big part of your life from what I see on your social media. You're really involved in not only transforming yourself in terms of your wellness and fitness, but also helping others do the same.
Yes, that was just such a funny coincidence. And, they say that your dream job doesn't really exist. You have to create it. But I found that a lot of the things I've ended up doing, whether it be producing or casting or coaching, have kind of evolved naturally, not even something I was going after. And that's sort of what happened with this was I did this health program. It's a low glycemic index eating plan. And it worked so well for me. And I felt so good that I was constantly referring people to my coach. And she said, well, you could just coach them yourself, because it was my sisters and my daughter and friends and family. And so I started coaching just because I wanted to share what worked for me, because I'd struggled my whole life with, obviously being in front of the camera, you have to show up as your best self, right? And I was always a person that struggled with that last 10 or 15 pounds that kept creeping back on, And so this worked so well for me, and I got so excited by how good I felt. And I have a sister who has MS, and she hadn't worked out in probably 25 years. We used to be workout buddies. And when she got sick, it just aged her. I saw her not able to do the things she loved to do, and she had gained 20 something pounds. And so she asked me about it, and I I started coaching her. She lost her weight. She literally looks like an entirely different person. She's working out at the gym with a trainer now. She has her life back. She's reversed aged by about 20 years.
That's amazing. I love your split screens that when you put them online and you show the before and after, and I'm like, oh my gosh, really
Right?
helping people, like you said, be their best selves. I mean, I'm a huge advocate of exercise. I just started this year doing hot yoga, and to say that's transformed my life, and emotionally, spiritually, physically, in so many ways, would be an understatement. So I get it. I hear what you're saying when people are in a rut and you're helping them get unstuck.
Yes, it's such a good feeling. Honestly, of all the things that I've done, this one brings me the most joy, and I feel the best about this kind of work because, adding years to somebody's life, because, let's face it, obesity causes a lot of disease, and being able to see them feel confident
And thrive,
happy
yeah.
and joyful. Yeah. And just personally in my own life, it's brought so much confidence back to my life. I don't know if that's why I finally, attracted the partner of my dreams, and life is really good right now. And I'm in a very good and happy place. And I feel really good about spreading the word about this program because A, it really works. And B, I just can't shut up about it.
I hear you. I hear you. And again, in true form, you're not just doing that. You are also now working on an audiobook by, is it a best-selling author, correct?
Yeah, well, her name is Heather Cobham, or Heather Brewer, but her writing nom de plume, as you would say, is Heather Cobham. And it's a book, it's a series, it's a trilogy that she's written about Oriental, which is a place very near and dear to my heart, because that is the town that my parents moved to when I was 17 years old. And it's a very cool quaint little sailing village that is known as the sailing capital of North Carolina, but full of all sorts of mysterious and interesting people. And I actually wrote a TV pilot. I didn't write it. I co-created. I had a screenwriter, John Ward. I don't know if you know him, but he's a local guy who I think a lot of your friends actually do know. He went to Chapel Hill as well, but he lives in LA now, and he's a wonderful screenwriter. Yeah, so John wrote it, and I gave him the ideas, and we kind of co-created it together. But so I haven't gotten that off the ground. There's just been a lot of things that have happened that kind of caused a delay on that. But Heather, my friend, has written this trilogy about a woman moving to Oriental, and the one I'm recording now is actually the third book in this series, but it's a prequel. So I kind of recommend reading them in the backwards order, because this one takes place.
This one takes place the story. Okay.
Yeah, in the time of women's suffrage, and it's really interesting. She's got a lot. It's packed with all sorts of good themes, and I'm really enjoying it. It's a lot of work and very laborious.
So I have 3 mystery books, and I did all of the audiobooks myself. When I say I did them myself, in a booth alone, then going back, fixing the mistakes, and then I had a good friend of mine, actually edit it and engineer it. But it is an amazing amount of work, because you don't realize how important it is to hold on to every single word and have the right intonation. And, it takes me back to like kindergarten, when they told you that reading out loud was going to be really important. And you were like, yeah, sure. It's sure, right? Kind of like algebra is going to be important. But you know what? Reading out loud, if you are doing an audiobook, because I think we're our worst self-critics, right? So you're sitting in there and you hear something and you're going, oh, I don't like the way I said that. So kudos to you for doing that. That sounds like a really awesome project. So you have clearly, you're a great example of a woman over 50 who continues to redefine herself. And what do you think it is in life? We are not our mothers. Our mothers obviously had much more. My mom was a lawyer, but she also had to do everything else, because back in the day, that was kind of the thing. Whereas now I think women have more freedom to do a lot of things that we might not have otherwise been steered towards. What is the secret to constantly redefining yourself and not allowing other people to define you by your age?
I think sometimes it's out of necessity, right? You have no other choice. That's one thing. You never know how strong you are until you actually are faced with a situation where you have to tap into some stuff that you can do hard things. That's one thing I tell myself all the time. You can do hard things. I can remember having to, after a particularly terrible breakup, having to rent a U-Haul truck and move myself in the pouring rain out of just saying to myself, you can do hard things. Like I really couldn't believe that I found myself in this situation, but this is how life goes. It's full of challenges. You don't know when the floor is going to drop out, and you have to pick yourself up and dust yourself off and move forward. I just have never been one to sit and wallow and feel sorry for myself.
That's great advice. I tell my kids all the time, by the time you've reached a certain age, you've walked over a lot of hot coals. And
yes.
Those hot coals help you realize your strength and your ability to, okay, something tough comes along and you go, you know what? I've been here before, not maybe exactly in this spot, but something similar to this. And I know how to handle this. My yoga teacher said the other day, we were doing getting back up and down on the floor, bending down, getting up, bending down, getting up, not using our hands. And he said, getting up off the floor is directly proportional without using your hands to the longevity of your life. And I thought, wow, what a great metaphor for everything, right? I mean, you just have to get back up off that floor. Maureen, any parting thoughts for women, maybe somebody who's out there and listening and just feeling stuck, like wanting to get to the next chapter, just not having that self-confidence for whatever reason and feeling like, well, there's nothing out there for me.
Well, I think journaling is a really helpful thing to ask. You really are your own best therapist, to put a pen in your hand and ask yourself some hard questions about what you really truly want and what would make you happy, and not looking at that as selfish. I think that's where a lot of women fall into a trap, is that not wanting for themselves because they've always put their children or their husband or their family members ahead of themselves, and asking themselves truly what would make me happy, right? There's nothing really wrong with that, but for many generations, I think that was not something that people supported. I think also I did a Tony Robbins program in 2016 called Unleash the Power Within, which was very powerful. And he is a very big advocate of changing your physiology. So for me, and also for my sister, who I was telling you about earlier that had MS, changing your physiology and getting your health to its best and feeling your best at your ideal weight and just feeling strong, that is very empowering.
Yeah.
And I find that the clients I've coached that have reached their goal are so full of excitement and joy. And, not to say that a woman has to adhere to being super skinny or anything like
that. It's about health. You're right. It's about feeling healthy, right?
Or how you feel your best, how you feel good in your own skin can really translate to some changes outwardly too, because you are going to project confidence, you're going to project excitement and joy and energy, really, just good energy. So for me, that was a really big thing, was to take that piece off the table, because for so many women, weight becomes such a heavy thing.
Sure. Well, that's some great advice, because I think, like you said, I think a lot of it is, just figuring out how we can be our best selves, and whether that's mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically, there's so many layers to that. Maureen, if people want to follow what you're doing, is there a place they can find you on social media?
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, under Maureen Mountcastle. And I post lots of healthy recipes and tips. And even if you don't, want to hear about my plan, you're probably going to get some information.
How do you spell your last name for listeners who, just to make sure they can find you?
Okay. It's Mountcastle, like a castle on a mountain, Mountcastle.
Gotcha. Well, thank you so much for being part of the show today. You really are an inspiration to me, so I know you will be an inspiration to others. And thank you for just sharing your story, and you're just continually redefining yourself. And that's, you're an amazing, I can see how you would be a mentor to so many young women. So thank you for that.
And
thank you for chatting with me today. I appreciate it.
I'm honored and thrilled to have been asked. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for joining us today. This show has been a production of Stage Might Communications. It is researched, written, hosted, produced, and edited by me, Amanda Lamb. The music for this show was composed and played by Reginald Griffin. The opinions of my guests are their own. If you have any ideas for the show, please reach out to me on Facebook at Stage Might. Thanks for listening.